Hey, do you want to learn about disorganized attachment style and disorganized attachment style examples? Hey, I'm Antia, creator and founder of the Magnetize Your Man Method. And look, this is an attachment style that so many experts and many of the literature do not talk about, which is the disorganized attachment style. So just let me tell you a little bit about it, because you may think, gosh, I don't know, I'm not really anxious, I'm not really avoidant, I don't know, I'm something in between, sometimes I have like a conflict between the two. So if you feel more like this, you may actually be a disorganized attachment style. Now, sometimes it's also referred to as the anxious ambivalent attachment style. Now, here's what it looks like. When you were a child and you were in high levels of distress, like you were sad or you were, freaked out or there was trauma, your parents were actually not responding in a coherent and conducive way how a normal parent would, right? So either like you were not soothed, meaning you had some other radical response. So maybe you got hit instead because you're not allowed to cry, right? Or even worse, you got abused. You got abused physically, verbally, and in the worst case scenario, oftentimes even sexually. Now, what happens is there's going to be a split, right? So that's why it's called disorganized. And what happens in that moment is there's a fragmentation that takes place. Why? Well, think about it. When you were a little baby, right, you're relying on your parents. You need them to soothe you, right? You need them, right? And on the other hand, now that you know that hit you, now you know that they abuse you, you also want to survive. And you know that in that presence, you may not survive. So then you're pulling out, and it actually becomes sort of like a really distorted, really, really erratic, almost like way of like fight or flight. That's like very extreme, very, very, very extreme, right? And oftentimes we feel a little bit more like we're too intense, right? Like oftentimes that kind of person that has a disorganized attachment style has really a wide range of emotional depth, right? And some men may be like, wow, this is like way too deep for me, right? Now, why is that? Because like when you were a child, also then growing up with a disorganized attachment style, you weren't always coping with it like congruently. You weren't always responding in the same way. Maybe in one response you were actually running, the other response you were fighting, you were arguing, you got angry, right? So it was not congruent, right? And why is that? It's because, remember, we talked about the fragmentation. So that means there are many different parts, as if like a mirror shatters in a million pieces, right? And so then every fragment has almost like its own life, has its own agenda, and has its own way coping with the world. Okay, so you're like, wow, this is really interesting. Now, what happens is, what does this person do in dating? So I give you a couple of examples. So this is how you know that you are more of a disorganized attachment style, because you have a very inconsistent and almost like a conflicting relationship with intimacy. Right? So on the one hand, you really crave it. Like you have this neediness inside of yourself, right? But then yet when you get it, you're almost like afraid of it. Like, stay away from me. This is not safe, right? Like I want separation. I want isolation, right? I want to be my individual self again, right? And so you may say, well, wait, isn't that true for so many? Yes. But what's true is like that the disorganized attachment style has it in a very extreme way. So imagine like a high level of distress, right? Like a fight or flight you can't even imagine, like almost like a trauma response. That's how intense it gets, right? Versus like when you look at the avoidant attachment style, for example, right? Like, so they're also afraid of intimacy, but they don't go into that distress. They cope with it in a much more disassociated way. Okay. Now, what's interesting about the disorganized attachment style is also very high levels of disassociation, very high levels in general to actually leaving your body. Meaning, if I were to say, hey, feel your feet firmly on the ground, you're like, oh, I'm in my body. Oh my God, I can rely on myself. I'm connected to myself, right? So the disorganized attachment style is oftentimes extremely disconnected. And this is something really important to know. And it's almost like really thinking like black and white. And this is why it's almost like I'm either all connected or I'm like disconnected. So there's no gray area, right? Remember, why is that? Well, because when there's a gray area, there's a tremendous amount of overwhelm. Why is that? Well, because you have so many different fragments, so many different agendas, so many different ways of approaching a situation that you're like, no, I just need to set myself like some sort of construct inside of myself, right? I need to have like some sort of structure. And so that was true for me for sure. Like this whole like black or white. So black or white is like, okay, he doesn't call at 5, I cut him off, right? He doesn't call it, he doesn't do this, we're done, right? Oh, we have the smallest argument, he's not the one. He doesn't know right away, he's not the one. So there's oftentimes a lot of like following of like very, very rigid rules. And there's like very little leeway for forgiveness. So give you an example, when I was dating and a man would make quote unquote a mistake, right? There's oftentimes a lot of emasculation comes in with the disorganized attachment style, right? Because I would literally just delete his phone number. Done, right? And so this is how it really is. Why can you do that? Well, because you have so much fragmentation. So you can actually cut off this one part. You're like, hey, I'm just going to still live with all the other parts, right? Okay. And this is really like you have this tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So you're living in extremes. So if you feel like, gosh, Antia, like I've been actually living in extremes my whole life, or I'm either like all into a relationship or I'm like all hell to the no, right? Then again, you may be a disorganized attachment style. Okay. So those are some of the examples. Extreme fight or flight, you have that parts conflict inside of yourself and you want to be soothed, but you feel threatened at the same time. So it's almost like a bipolar, it's almost like a split personality experience, right? Where you may even be like, wait, is my personality split? So you may even ask yourself this question before. And so now you know why this is actually happening. Because remember, the baby in that moment, when it gets abused, when it should feel safe, right? It has to like split. Why? Well, because it's saying, well, wait a minute, I should feel safe. I'm coming out of the womb. In the womb, I was safe, right? I was connected to the umbilical cord. I was nurtured. But so I know that to be true. There's a truth, right? But then there's a truth, how it actually is being represented to me in this moment. Okay, and this may be like in an abusive way. So now I have to start become distorted because my truth is obviously not the truth, but I still have my truth. But now I also need to start accepting there's another truth out there. So how do I consolidate the fact that there's like now two different truths, right? And it's like I kind of have to make myself wrong, but on the other hand, I know instinctively, right? We have like this animal instinct inside of ourselves, right? I know instinctively there's something off. Like this is not right. This is not genuine. This is not congruent. This is not natural, right? But yet I have to adapt to my circumstance as well in order to what? Survive, right? Survival will override everything, right? Okay. So, and I know we have like our prefrontal cortex and we're starting to make more and more sense of it. Right? And we're like, wait, this doesn't logically make sense and things like that. But okay, so those parts are colliding with each other. So if you feel like, oh my God, Antia, that's who I am. Thank you. I was always wondering who I am. And I'm not the anxious, I'm not the avoidant, right? I'm actually the disorganized attachment style. And now what do I do? What do I do? How do I bring those parts together? How do I get out of fight or flight or, freeze? And, how do I get out of this living in extremes and this intensity, right? And just like swinging from one a side of the spectrum to the complete opposite side of the spectrum in a very unpredictable way and putting a lot of stress on your nervous system on a regular basis. So if that is you, and you also seem to be looping in dating, in romantic relationships, you sabotage what you actually like. You sabotage when you're interested in a man and you don't know why, then I invite you to come on a Magnetize Your Man heart-to-heart chat with me where we get crystal clear on what it is for you particularly. What are the internal dialogues? When is that fight moment happening? When is that flight moment happening? What is correlated? What emotion expressions are correlated to that behavior that you're exhibiting in that moment? So we're really looking at like a cluster, right? We're looking at a sequence that happens on a regular basis. We're finding that pivotal point for you so you can turn that train around and you can have your happily ever after while still feeling safe. So for that, hop on over to magnetizeyourman.com and grab your slot as long as they last. You can also click the link below this video. And hey, don't forget to also subscribe to my YouTube channel to receive many more juicy videos like this that may open your eyes in a whole new way. This is it for today. Much love to you, and I will talk to you very soon. Mwah!